Chairperson of the KZN Growth Coalition and the entire leadership present today. Let me also greet the KZN Provincial Planning Commission of the Office of the Premier, the Strategic Management Branch present here, which is led by Dr. Ndlovu. And then you've got the Stakeholder Coordination Branch led by Mr. Kubega Sitembi. So you've got amongst ourselves, our IT and communications team. As I said earlier on, my name is Bata Mzoneli, coming from the Stakeholder Management Chief Directorate. This session this morning, it will be co-chaired or co-facilitated with Ms. Marti Milne, who is also coming from the Strategic Management Branch. The meeting is about the PGDS, a review, as it has been in the invitation. I'm not too sure, can Ms. Anesh Tulasi mute? There is a sound that is coming from there. Thank you so much. We are now ready to start with the session. I trust everybody is well and everybody is most welcome for this session. Let us open this session with a prayer, and may I ask Mr. Siyabonga Mngai to lead us in that part. Thank you so much.
From SIB and to indicate this morning that they'll be there. And Russell and
Mr. Siyabonga Mngai, are you on the platform? Seemingly there's a challenge. May I ask Ms. Marti Milne to just give us a brief prayer, and then we continue with the proceedings of the morning. Thank you.
Father God, we thank you this morning for this opportunity to engage, to build our province, and to work together to improve the lives for all. Father, bless these proceedings, guide us through your wisdom. Lord, also a reminder to please be with those who have lost family members, friends, colleagues as part of our pandemic. Please give us the strength to also support those in need. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Thank you so much, Ms. Milne, for that prayer. Then we are now on our procedural matters, item 1.2. May I ask the representative from the KZN Growth Coalition to give us their remarks. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting us. My name is Andre Kipil. I'm the coordinator of the KZN Growth Coalition. We have asked our colleagues to comment, and some of them have expressed wish to join. So I'm aware that if not already, the following will be joining us. Antoinette White, LED manager from Coxton Municipality, Charles Thompson from Demco Group, Kishore Kaburji from PricewaterhouseCoopers, Pilani Napanga, also from the same company, Tricky Brooks, Brooks Facilitating Services, Eugene De Beer, Butela Rilembe, LED Program Manager, Russell Curtis, Pumla Jali, from Invest Durban, and then we've got Jude Naidu from and Mju from Greytown Municipal, Greytown Road Coalition chapter. So I think there will be others that join as well, but I would like to express our appreciation once again, and then this is our fourth engagements with the Planning Commission. As a matter of fact, we were party to the contribution towards provincial chapter before the national chapter was even completed, as Tricky Brooks will tell you. So we support the initiative, but we obviously, like all of us, have certain comments and observations. Like we are all very good in South Africa on planning, we are not so good on implementation. And that is basically the biggest gripe that our members have, that we are not implementing the plan both provincially and nationally to the extent that we should. Some of the major challenges that we have is that there are no mechanism to our knowledge, unless we are to be corrected, of a way of measuring the progress that we are making provincially and nationally. There are problem areas in terms of deteriorating security, of doing business and economic growth in South Africa, notably the invasions of sites and attempted extortions of money that peaked in 2018-19, then decreased, and now it's on the rise again. In more particular trouble sort of way is the fact that there is implications of and collusions of some of the officials and in particular councillors in the way they obviously help those that are misbehaving, to carry out the unsavory activities. Also, in terms of the way the budgets are structured, we are all conscious of the history where we come from as a country, and obviously the need for social upliftment and all the services that should be provided to every South African. But at the same time, there is a marked decrease percentage-wise of budgets that are spent on those social services at the expense of the infrastructure development and infrastructure maintenance, which ultimately affect the very poor communities the most when it comes to the neglect that we have seen over the last 15 years in particular. So then we have obviously an area of trouble when it comes to consequence management. And in particular, as President Ramaphosa has mentioned in SONA a few days ago, that nonsense must stop. We run meetings 3-4 times a year in 11 municipal areas called the Executive Liaison as part of the Growth Coalition work. And we know what's happening in terms of water provision and sanitation, in terms of electricity, in terms of servicing of sites, new greenfield sites, where in the past the services would be brought to the boundary. Now, not only they are not, but the developers have to pay for other municipal services and infrastructure even away from their sites in order to be considered for development. So those are areas where obviously my colleagues can expand, but I thought I'd mention this because we don't want to be generalizing all over. We would like to hone on and concentrate on areas where are the biggest problems and biggest challenges. I'll stop now and see if there's anyone else from private sector who wants to comment at this stage.
Good morning, Mr. Kipiela.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Kipiela,
Yes.
we lost you towards the last brief. We didn't get you quite well. Thank you.
Okay, when did you lose me?
Lost you just towards the last three sentences that you were articulating to.
Well, I was articulating the lack of financial planning in terms of services provision to greenfields development in particular. And I think Charles Thompson is connected. Maybe he would like to add, to what I was saying, because obviously he is one of our biggest developers and spends hundreds of millions of rands on additional costs, which, in our opinion, it shouldn't, because then the developments become very expensive. The profit margin is very small, and that's why we don't have any cranes or very few cranes around Durban and major cities in recent years. And that's one of those problems that we have, that we don't budget for maintenance on infrastructure development. We don't budget on provision of services to greenfield sites, among other things. On top of this, we have this frequent invasions of so-called business forums that obviously disturb and interfere with development and affect the bottom line.
Thank you, Mr. Kipiela. We thank you so much for the observations and the challenges as alluded to. I will therefore request that when the chairperson of the PPC is on the platform and the colleagues from strategic management comment or respond to what you've just alluded to. But at this particular stage, can I allow the apologies if there are any from the Office of the Premier and also from the KZN Growth Coalition. It's item 1.3 now, and then let me just take such apologies if there are any. Thank you.
One apology from Mr. Moses Tembe.
Thank you, Mr. Moses Tembe. Thank you so much, Mr. Andre Kipiela. From the Office of the Premier, and apologies, I'm noticing two hands. Can I then note in this order Mr. Paul van Heerden, Mr. Frikkie Brooks, and Ms. Dawn Donning in that order, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to apologize for Mr. Eugene de Beer. He's not attending from Vutela LED. I'm attending on his behalf today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Van Heerden. And Mr. Frikkie Brooks.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you. I would just like to register the apology for Mr. Mark Taylor from Elan. He sent me a mail just this morning to request that I should just apologize for him, please. Thank you.
Ms. Dawn Donning.
Thank you, Facilitator. Apology comes from the Deputy Chairperson of the Provincial Planning Commission, Mr. T.W. Mpunu, who is not well. However, our chairperson is in the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Donning. Ms. Vanessa Nobela.
Morning, Chair. I would like to send apologies for Mr. Tami Sitole, who is the President of the Zululand Chamber. I'm here attending on his behalf. Thank you.
You're most welcome, Ms. Nobela, Mr. Siyabonga Mai, and Anesh Tulasi. Thank you. In that order.
Thank you, Chairperson. We have received an apology from Mr. V. Bester from SAPEF. Thank you.
Apology accepted. Mr. Anesh Tulasi.
Good morning, Chair. This is Anesh Turasi from Newcastle Municipality, Manager LED. I'm just wondering, where is Mr. Peters? Did he send an apology, Johan Peters from Newcastle Road Coalition?
Johan hasn't responded to our invitation, so I can double check with Kim. He's very, very active member of Growth Coalitions. He's always with us, but this time, I don't know, somehow we've missed him.
Thank you very much, Andres.
We thank you so much for the apologies, and they will be noted accordingly. I am not too sure, Ms. Ngobela and Anesh, if these are the current hands or thank you so much. Andre, I see you're flicking. I'm seeing, do you wish to say anything?
Who is that, me?
Yes, I'm seeing you're flicking on the screen. I thought you wanted to say something.
I don't know how to flick, so how come I'm flicking?
No, it is fine. It's accepted. Thank you so much. I just said all the apologies are noted accordingly, and they will be recorded as such by the Secretariat in the Office of the Premier. And we have come to section 2, which are matters of discussions. At this stage, I will hand over to Ms. Marti Milne, whom we are co-facilitating this session. Over to you, Ms. Marti Milne. Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mzoneli. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and indeed welcome. I know that your schedules are incredibly busy, so with that, I will be handing you over to our chairperson, Mr. Msiwa, to take us through the presentation, just as a reminder of what it is we'd like to focus on today. The presentation is intended to be very short so that we can have more time for engagement. Just a reminder, the focus is really on getting inputs, and we would like to have a problem solution approach. So whilst we acknowledge we've got challenges and where our interventions have not identified those correctly in terms of the analysis, we really want to invite some suggestions. How can we do things differently? We've had discussions previously about the budget issues, about the nature of fraud and corruption. If we keep doing the same thing, we need to expect the same result. So whilst we are keen on beefing up and definitely strengthening those challenges, we are also eagerly awaiting new proposals and practical suggestions as to how the province can address those. With that, Mr. Msiwa, if I may hand over to you and the team for the presentation on the strategy.
Greetings to the leadership of the KZN Growth Coalition. Greetings to the fellow commissioners, Dr. Tutu. Greetings to the Office of the Premier, and greetings to the support team, which is the Secretariat of the Planning Commission. I can see already that there are some familiar faces on the side of the KZN Growth Coalition. I've spoken to some of the members, Andre and Freaky, before. So I think this is now sort of the time again to enjoy deeper engagement in terms of what we're trying to do. You know, Sisbata?
No, I think it was me, Chairperson. I was just responding to your greetings and said greetings, Chairperson, and the rest of the... Yeah.
Okay, no, thanks.
Continuous, sorry about that.
Yeah. Now, as indicated by Marty, the purpose of today is actually to solicit comments and inputs from our broad range of stakeholders on the draft review of the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy. Now, the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy is now in its third 5-year term. We started the province, as a province, we started with the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy in 2011. That was followed by a review in 2016, which then led again to another strategy, which we are now has come to its end, and we are now on the third 5-year iteration of the strategy. I will naturally just go through the processes that we have embarked as the commissioners, and as I've indicated, this is the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy, and once it has then been consulted and more or less consensus has been reached with the suggestions that might be coming in to enhance the strategy, we will then present it to the Premier and the Provincial Executive Council for final adoption. And once that strategy has been adopted, we will then move into the second part, which is the Provincial Growth and Development Plan. Naturally, we also, having listened to the opening remarks from the coalition and the huge cry that's coming all over the country around the issues of implementation, we would also welcome even suggestions on how to implement this same strategy. Although that was not the primary purpose of this consultation, but I think it would add significant value if you could also, that there could be some indications, as Majo was saying, around sharpening sort of the implementation of the strategy. With that, then we can then now, I will move formally into the presentation. As I've indicated, the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy is a provincial strategy to grow our province for the benefit of all our citizens. It includes growing the economy for the development and improvement of the quality of life of all people living in the province. The PGDS represents the establishment of a clear line of sight to the national policy, which is the National Development Plan and the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework, continental and global frameworks. You'll excuse me, distinguished audience. There is always a time lag between one slide to the other. So if you could just bear with me whenever there's that momentary silence. As I indicated to you, the PPC commenced with the PGDS review, and the PGDS was adopted in 2012 as a framework for provincial development in partnership with all our stakeholders. The last review of the PGDS was in 2016. Naturally, we are adopting a dual strategy of communicating and creating awareness and inviting inputs through different media strategies, targeted consultation, all existing structures that are used and are currently in use. We are also doing targeted consultation where appropriate, and of course these are guided by our stakeholder coordination unit, the Office of the Premier. We are also using sort of webinars and the provincial district development model structures, and of course the social councils. The focus of this is to actually get inputs sorry for that. The focus of this is to actually get input and critical inputs. And I think as the Growth Coalition, having been a long partner, will be able also to assist us in actually sharpening our spear and in terms of actually what needs more to be our areas of emphasis and focus in the strategy. Just a number of issues that have guided the review of the strategy that we're presenting to you today. I think as the Commission, we have looked at what has worked in the past 5 years, which is the 2014 to 2019, through the provincial performance review that was conducted. We have also looked at what has changed in the public sector environment, more especially the impact of COVID, and of course necessarily the need to build after this huge storm. In other words, rebuilding after this huge storm of COVID. We've also, in any planning, we always make assumptions, and when those assumptions don't materialize or come out in different form, naturally we need to modify and take those things out and bring in new issues that are informed by emerging opportunities that arise from the scanning of the environment. We've also been guided by the 2019 and February 20 Lekgotla resolutions. We've also been guided very much by the emerging planning frameworks, more especially the medium-term strategic framework that's come from the Office of the Presidency with its priorities. We've also been guided by the provincial priorities that have been pronounced by the Provincial Executive Council. We've also then done our situational analysis, socio-economic outlook, looked at the 25-year review, looked at quite a number of community satisfaction surveys, the impact of COVID, and also other sort of relevant emerging issues. The main focus of the medium-term strategic framework, it's actually the emphasis on outcome-based implementation and planning, and which actually emphasizes that you must plan for impacts to actually change things. You must actually indicate more granularly the outcomes. In other words, what is it that you are wanting to achieve that will lead then to the desired impacts. We also need to be focusing more on outputs rather than activities. In other words, what is it that we need to produce to deliver? And also then activities and so on. I might just as well say that the strategy that we are asking to be enriched by your comments, it would be around issues of impacts and outcomes. When we go to the PGDP, the plan, the focus will be on outputs, and I will talk later on around the issue of monitoring and evaluation, which also be focusing annually on the type of inputs that might drive the type of incomes that we are intending to achieve, and consequentially the impacts. The tool that we've used is being used to actually drive this outcome-based approach is what is termed the theory of change. And naturally, it's actually sort of in the presentation. But as always said, our strategy deals with what needs to be done and how. The work component you'll find in the chapter 4 of the document that I will be presenting, which is the Special Development Framework. In other words, when all these things we say should be done, how should they be done in specific spatial or geographical locations in the province? So that will be also coming in the document that I'm presenting to you. I will just take you through the table of contents, which is, if you're reading sort of the document that we're presenting to you, it's mainly consists of about 7 chapters. The chapter 1 deals, of course, with the introduction and the approach. It then deals with the policy context within which the strategy is being developed and reviewed. We then move to chapter 2. Can we go to chapter 2, Don? Chapter 2. Okay. We then go to chapter 2 of the document. The chapter 2 of the document do a strategic analysis, which basically, we have adopted the sustainability matrix approach because it is all encompassing. We have dealt with issues around environmental resilience, human development and social capital, radical economic transformation in KZN, radical agricultural socio-economic transformation programs, economic development, infrastructure, spatial development, governance, and the cross-cutting focus areas, which will be elaborated when I go down into the strategy. From there, having sort of gone through this to actually search for areas of opportunity and improvement, we then have dovetailed into chapter 3 of the document. And chapter 3 of the document starts, of course, with a vision statement, which we will share with this auspicious audience for input and for comments. We then zoom directly into the provincial strategic priorities. Naturally, priority number 1 is, of course, what everybody is crying about: poor implementation. And if we can then deal with those issues of a capable development state, priority number 1, we think it is going to be a greater enabler for all the other following sort of 7 priorities. We then move on from here to chapter 4 of the document. The chapter 4 of the document deals with the where part of all those sort of priority areas and other areas. How should we then be interacting in specific spaces or areas, and how should we then also be enhancing the comparative advantage of the different spaces in the province? Also about sort of the different planning frameworks. Of course, we also touch here into the difficult spaces of the nature of the land tenure systems that is actually peculiar to KZN, where there is private ownership and also communal ownership, and try to deal with issues then of integrated sort of planning in order to encourage economic development. We then, after that, we then move to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 then deals with our catalytic projects. Those projects that have got, if implemented, have got a multiplier and a ripple effect in terms of addressing poverty, inequality, and naturally unemployment. So these are some of the key projects that could put sort of the province, the districts, the municipalities to be enabled to meaningfully attack the triple challenges that the NDP speaks to. We then move to Chapter 6 of the document, which is again the institutional framework for the implementation. And we're really looking very much forward, given that implementation is the common cry, that whether this chapter really brings to focus the issues that everybody is worried about. And maybe, as I've alluded, that while the framework might be there in the strategy, there might be issues of implementation that must be going stronger into the PGDP, into the plan itself. We then move to Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is the monitoring and evaluation chapter of the strategy. It is the Planning Commission has decided that this is going to be one of its key focus areas. Now, naturally, this will be enabled by actually meaningful and accurate data reporting. And to this extent, together with the Office of the Premier, the issue of the Provincial Nerve Center, it's coming in to the fore to say we need to have a common repository from which we can then draw meaningful data for the interpretation, for the modification of and seeing whether what we intended to do is being achieved. And we need to have much more evidence-based amendments of our plans and our actions. So the monitoring and evaluation, and as I've indicated earlier, this monitoring and evaluation at the level of outputs is an exercise that perhaps will be happening every year. At the level of outcomes, it might be happening at mid-term of the strategy. That's 2 to 3 years in the lifespan of the strategy. Again, just to see whether the outputs that we are annually monitoring are starting to really drive us to the types of outcomes and the type of impacts that we're envisaging. So in a nutshell, this is what this document that we are requesting you for your input is all about. Naturally, I will go into the presentation, but at this stage, I'm tempted to skip to go to actually to the micro details of each chapter, because I'm sure that is in the document itself. We are now sharing the vision statement that we have, and it hasn't changed from what we had previously. But again, we are fleshing it because this is the vision of the province. This is not the vision of the commission. This is not the vision of the Provincial Executive Council. This is the vision for all the people of KZN. And we are sharing it to ensure validation and amendment where deemed necessary. I will not spend too much time here because I don't want to crowd out the inputs and the discussions that we're going to be having, other than to say that, as I've indicated in the outline, these are the key sub-points or sub-bullet points that you are going to find in Chapter 1. In other words, the alignment of the national and the provincial priorities, and of course the harmonization of terminology. On Chapter 2, as I've indicated, that was our strategic analysis. You will see just again in bullet points the type of the reference material that we've used, different sections that we have actually pulled out to actually inform the Chapter 2 that we're asking for your input on. As I've indicated, Chapter 3 naturally starts then to deal with the provincial priorities, and first on the list naturally is the building of a capable and ethical and developmental state. That is so crucial for us to actually achieve all these other areas. And if we fail in terms of actually significantly making headways in terms of that number one, we will not be able to actually gain too much in terms of our activities in the other areas. I know, for instance, there is a draft document that has come out from the presidency, which is about the professionalization of the public service. But I think it goes deeper than that. It also deals deep with issues of functional excellence. It deals with issues of operational resilience, strategic effectiveness. And those are the areas that perhaps must be deepened strongly in our plan in order to able to create the right environment to drive economic transformation and job creation. And drive it in a much more holistic than from a specific project perspective. In other words, it must be systemic. All these things, they must come as a natural cause simply because they are enabled by a capable and ethical development state. Improvement of education and skills, consolidating the social wage gap through reliable basic services, water, sanitation, refuse, electricity, all the basic things that form the component. We then move then to the question issues of special integration in Chapter 5, which is about human settlements and local government. And I think, again, this is another area because the issue of sustainable human settlements has evaded us. We've talked about houses, but not human settlements. And we need to be moving much more deeper. Transformation of local government, ensuring at least that there's leadership and there's governance. The audit outcomes are indicating that we are not going to be gaining much public confidence unless we remain accountable in terms of the funds that get deployed from the national fiscus. So there are huge issues, and we would like again and implore that those are the areas that we would really like to be strengthened. We then move then to the question, because these other areas are forming part of what normally we call the social foundation of every society. But that social foundation of society, without social cohesion and safe communities, will always remain elusive. And it's important that we deal with social cohesion and safe communities to actually deepen and strengthen the social foundation. Being part of Africa and part of the world, and given the fact that most of the world the wealth of the world is driven through value chains, it's actually important that we form part of that. And of course, the discussions around the decomposition of value chains, where we're able to get comparative advantage, actually drive for more productive investment and productive partnerships. This becomes very important in the context of Chapter 7. We then again, as I've indicated, I'm not going to go back to the slide because we've dealt with it. We've also even done some much more work around the water resources of the province to actually support sustainable development in Izigodi and in our small towns, by actually giving much more specific focus on the rivers that run past these communities. And to that extent, we have tried and say there are 374 potential dams that could be made and could actually enhance production. And production, as we all know, enables people to actually buy money and not sell money. These are our areas of concern in the document, where specifically we feel that inputs would actually enhance, the district development model, which is a one area plan, through the integration of different plans that government has and the implementation framework. Issues naturally of the fourth industrial revolution and the knowledge economy, issues of the integrated sustainable rural development, agricultural reform. We've tried to deal with gender-based violence, contextualizing, of course, the MTSF targets to KZN with specific interventions, and fundamentally strengthening our M&E capacity and capability to make sure that we drive the right outcomes and impacts, that our outputs are really concrete, real, and not imaginary. This then also calls to a stronger participation and a request for stronger participation in our action work groups, where most of the work around this plan is actually taking place. And therefore the specific knowledge bases and delegations to be deployed to the action working groups, so that these action work groups can actually drive the right outputs. I think I'd already dealt with Chapter 4 previously, and I'm not going to, again, elaborate much on that, except that this is what you'll see in the document. It makes the point it's not only about the what, it is also about the where component. We then have dwelt again with the issue of the catalytic projects, and I'm saying, and also critically important to this again is the Nerve Center, where we're doing a lot of work and lobbying in the office of the Premier to make sure that the Nerve Center and other systems that are created in government bring in coherence and meaningful interpretation of the information that we have. I've dealt with the issue of the institutional framework previously, and I'm not going to dwell again here. And I will then also have dealt with the issue of the monitoring and evaluation, where we are deploying even some of our commissioners who are knowledge specific in terms of these areas to actually assist. We are now at the point with the strategy where the final draft has been crafted by the Commission, is actually in the website. We have presented it to the Premier and to the PEC, it's received support at this stage, naturally subject to broader consultation and input. We've set up the provincial MEM monitoring and evaluation forums, and we are in the process of inviting stakeholders. The consultation process, we hope to conclude it by the 28th of February. And of course, the final reviewed documents that takes into account the inputs will then be presented, has got to be finalized by the 31st of March 2021. Again, we're just now indicating where these documents can be lodged, the sort of the links to the documents are actually outlined in this document. And of course, being not that very computer literate myself, we're just also indicating certain forms that have been designed by our IT fundis to actually ease the process of making inputs. So this slide actually then gives that level of information.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Maybe just a last slide, just again to thank everybody. Again, thank you for making your time to actually listen to what we have been trying to do as the Planning Commission. And we're really looking forward for your inputs that will enrich this document. Thank you very much, Siswata and Mati, and the program director. I'm now done. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, I hope to see all the hands, but I am going to just ask Ms. Mzoneli if she could help me in case we do miss some. We will also be screening on the chat box, and as we've indicated in that last slide, inputs and suggestions also available through those forms and on the website. And we thank you, the team, also for preparing and already indicating some of the areas they would have to or would wish to engage on. But it's also very interesting that some of our participants were part of the previous drafters, so we would also be quite keen to hear any further improvements and inputs from that perspective. With that, I am going to open for questions and issues that we need and would wish to discuss. I did hear somebody saying they don't know how to flicker. When you actually click on your initials, if you don't have a hand, it will cause us to see a flicker, or some of us call it a flash. I'm waiting to see hands. I see Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Marty, and to members of the Growth Coalition and the Office of the Premier, the Planning Commission. My greetings go to the Chair and members of the Commission. Good morning to everyone. Inspired and triggered by the almost deathly silence after the presentation. Just a quick reminder, I think in particular to all our members of the Growth Coalition, that this plan, the strategy that's been presented to us here this morning, as was highlighted also there, is the province's plan. So it is just as much ours as it is the states, as it is Labour's, as it is civil societies. So therefore there's definitely an onus on us to take up that responsibility and to ensure that what's going to be put down as the strategy for the next 5 years is something the Growth Coalition and the business community in particular is going to be happy with, and that they commit to put their weight fully behind it to see that that gets implemented. Now, I think Andre did raise very validly up front the issues about monitoring evaluation. Do we really measure what we do? I think I picked up quite strongly on that there are strong M&E opportunities in here. But I think firstly we need to be sure that we get the issues that needs to be addressed, that we get them right. And personally, and I think as already been indicated, I've been very closely involved with this process. I'm comfortable with the structure, and I think if there's any further comments, we should take the opportunity to go onto the website of the Commission by means of the second last slide that already opens up the links for us to slides where we can go and comment on, and that we encourage members to please go and put that in there. So your views, I think, is really what is now needed to refine the strategy in taking us forward. I know that times are really difficult at this stage, but it's at times like this where I'm constantly reminded by the fact that even though we may be sometimes focusing, Andre, too much on planning and not necessarily enough on implementation, we all agree with that, but please just remember that failing to plan means planning to fail, and we can't afford that under the circumstances we have at the moment. So I think those are just a couple of comments from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. No names were mentioned as to who the participants were in drafting, but thank you very much for that. Andres, I see you have unmuted, maybe from your side?
Yes. Thank you. Fricky's comments are valid. We've been together on this for 10, 15 years now, even before the provincial plan was put together. So the structure, the chapters and everything else, I don't think there's much you can change, because between the national and provincial, that's fine-tuned. I think the monitoring and evaluation is what is really the subject matter, should be the subject matter of our discussions, and the input from our colleagues from private sector, either today or, they can do it through the channels that they have available. If you look at the performance, let me just give you one example. That's the housing budget allocations at all municipalities. If you look at the last 15 years, in terms of what they ran, what we were buying in terms of structure, top structure 15 years ago, for the same money now, it's a third. So 2/3 of the money is being stolen. And then you can go for other allocations as such, let alone the vanity projects that are approved and allowed to be spent in terms of municipal budgets. I'm warning on the municipal budgets because that's where the action is, that's where the outputs are either good or non-existent. So if you consider that we already have a structure through the KZN Growth Coalitions with the participations of the Department of the Premier, COGTA, and the Economic Development and Tourism, we operate already in 11 municipalities. And we know what's happening in those municipalities. So if you look at the Auditor General's inputs, and hopefully now with them having more teeth, they can become more involved. If we can now have a mechanism to work with them through the growth coalitions or any other structure where the public-private sector is engaged and talk to each other, maybe we can start having ways and means of actually catching out the crooks. Because honestly, let's not beat around the bush. We have a problem of theft in South Africa on a scale that, is, if not checked and stopped, at least the speed reduced. We may have 1,000 plans of national nature and provincial nature, and it's not going to make any difference. So we have to look at mechanisms of, monitoring and evaluations and then consequent management. That's where that's this update of this plan and the outcomes of that update should be incorporated and implemented. Maybe other colleagues from private sector want to comment or public sector, because this just doesn't exist among the municipal or government officials. Private sector is equally to blame, sometimes even more than the officials, in terms of the looting and theft. Thank you.
Right, valid points. Let's see if there are any other hands. I see Charles Thompson.
Yes, hi, good morning everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be involved. Can you hear me clearly? Is my microphone clear enough?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, so just adding on to what Andres alluded to there, I mean, as a developer, we've probably done about 7 billion rands worth of developments in the KZN area in the last 5 years. And from our experience on the private sector side, is it's really laborious and tough to get projects going. So you can have all the sales, all the infrastructure, all the plans correct, the money, the funding, everything. And it's just, a 6-month battle to try and get your developments going, just in terms of the, we've talked about the red tape and just trying to get each department out of its silo and look at it more holistically, which Andre and his team and the catalytic team have been really helpful with, particularly in the last year. So, I just wanted to highlight, we had a couple of points in that slide, which was building a developable state, job creation, education, skills creation, social cohesion. All of those items predominantly will revolve around jobs, developing, training, and if we don't allow development to go ahead and fast track it, so I'm not talking about pie in the sky development, I'm talking about development where the developers have credentials, they've got the funds, the market demands what they're developing. If we don't assist those guys rapidly, what's going to make that developer or company want to keep investing back in the KZN area rather than just going somewhere else where it's easier? And that's something that I deal with on a daily basis, thinking, do I really want to invest another X 2, 3, 4 billion rand and just deal with the headache of trying to get projects going that are 100% legal, viable, and just having to deal with that, that continuous, please, you've got to, if we want to put this to the top of the pile, you've got to pay. If you want to do this, you have to speak to that guy, and then that guy refers me to someone else. And that's the problem, and we've got to cut that out, because it becomes one of the biggest obstacles for me as a developer is the pain of trying to get something live. So yeah, I fully concur with what Andres just said.
Okay, thank you. I also see Nilesh Singh. I'm not sure if that's you. I see you unmuted. If you want to contribute. And then after that, I also see the hand of Magji Ashin. And apologies, I'm using the names that are coming up as part of Teams. Nilesh, is that just muting?
Sorry, my microphone was unmuted.
Okay, thank you for that. Magji Ashin, floor is yours. Charles, if you're done, if we could ask you to lower your hand in case you've got another opportunity and you want to raise something else. Thank you.
Okay. Morning, thanks. Thank you for including me in this session. I guess my comment is more around the fact that KZN has the potential to become a larger contributor nationally. And so we currently find ourselves as a province delivering 16% of the country's GDP. And I'm passionate about the fact that we can do better than 16%. And I guess it comes down to the plan, it comes down to the implementation that was discussed today. And I guess I'm going to just use this opportunity to encourage all that in a low growth environment, we do have the opportunity to outperform our peers and to try and probably box in a category that we should be at, higher than 16%, and change some of the economic drivers of the province. So some of the things around the extent to which we are a net importer, we have the ability to shift that, whether it's in some sectors or the other. I look forward to us coming up with a plan that really does maximize the potential of KZN and exceed the 16% levels that it has been for some time. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just checking if there are any other hands. Right, well, Tabani, is it Charlotte?
Miss Marti. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, Marti. Yes, Marti.
Yeah,
Please
thanks,
note.
Chairperson. Yeah. I think thanks, Chairperson. I think thanks for the presentation. Just greetings to the Planning Commission, members of the Growth Coalition. It's quite exciting, as I think as Ricky said, with the plans, especially with the tough times. And I think I was quite interested in the presentation of social cohesion, addressing unemployment. I think especially as SAPI, as we operate in rural areas in terms of plantations, I think I was quite, I think something that will take forward and contribute on, where the chairperson said, look, let's not just look at investor big projects that we do it in Kumazi, but what do we do to other municipalities, to have more plantations so that, we can take our people more jobs, especially where sometimes forestry is or plantation is probably on our sector, we the only employer sometimes in those areas. So I think we will be making a contribution. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that. I also note the hands of Bonginkosi Madikizela and Rudolf Erasmus, if we can take those two hands in that order.
Thank you, Chairperson. Bonginkosi Madikizela here from Utugela Economic Development Agency. I wanted to find clarity on the role that can be played by these district development agencies in terms of the plan, the provincial growth plan, because municipalities sometimes are hamstrung because of the legislation that they have to follow in the implementation, maybe sometimes of projects. They take a long time because they have to sit and make approvals and everything. But you find that if you use an instrument like in a municipality like the development agency, you find that decision-making is usually quicker, and sometimes you find that the implementation also can be fastened or quickened because of this. So in the plan, what is their role in terms of this growth and development plan for the province? And also, the province has got this competitive advantage, or has got an advantage of, in terms of maritime, the harbors, the two harbors that we have there, that is the Durban Harbour, and then we've got the Richards Bay as well. What is the positioning of those two harbors, and also in terms of also having what can be called this land harbor of what we can call a dry port, which can be a link between the dry port in Johannesburg and the port in Durban, where you find that there are so many trucks on the road, but if we use rail and we have another dry port somewhere in the middle of the province, so that we can ease the congestion in Durban, but at the same time, in terms of taking the trucks off the N3. Thank you.
Right, noted, and thank you. Rudolf Erasmus, I think you were next.
Chair, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much. Good day to all. Growth Coalition, Premier's Office. My
My name is Rudolf Erasmus. I represent the Kokstad Ratepayers Association from Kokstad. And I would like to add to what Andre said. On ground level, we find that our biggest problem is not COVID. Our biggest problem is fighting our local government and government per se. If you look at the states of municipalities in South Africa, this is where growth starts. This is where the action actually happens. This is where job creation is. This is where tax are being paid so that it can go higher. And currently, commerce have been annihilated completely from the going politics. We have been abused seriously, and we're struggling to make ends meet. Our rates have been increased 50% 3 years ago. We've got no help, not from Kokta, from no state department we get any help. We're currently in High Court to fight this, and we are fighting, we're using our resources where we need to build businesses and we need to expand and do job creations. We currently finding ourselves in High Court just to get to a plain playing field, or try and get to a plain playing field, to start with decent development again. 10 of our top developers have pulled out of complete development in our town because it's not sustainable, it's not cost effective, and they want to go elsewhere. Big investors are selling out of town because there's no accountability for the wrongdoings of the municipality. We see the audits that come out, no clean audits, but there's no accountability for that. And this puts the community probably in the worst sentiment state than it's ever been in the country. So my suggestion is that we need to go back to the basics and we need to fix our foundations. And our foundations in the country for economical growth is our municipalities. And we really need to focus on that. And according to the first strategy, if I can just read it quickly again on the presentation, it states here that building a capable ethic development state. That is exactly what we want to strive for, but currently it's impossible if our foundation is in the state it is. Chair, thank you for the opportunity.
Right, thank you very much for those inputs. I also see the hands of Anesh Tulasi and M. Madansela. Apologies, I would not have the first name. If I could take inputs in that order.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for having me today. Just to recap the previous speaker's issues about a dry port. Newcastle municipality is at the moment, actually, if you look at the locality of the plan of the province, we are midway between Johannesburg and Durban. So at the moment, we are at a very advanced stage of developing a dry port in Newcastle. And all the railway lines, the sidings have just been revamped by Spoornet, but we're also doing a dry port next to it on land that belongs to us. So it is exciting for us because the feasibility has proven it's well worth it. We are just busy with some geotech stuff, and then we're going to be presenting this thing also to, once the business plan has been finalized. We've got some funders on standby. Basically, it is to actually take away the trucks from the road, because one train can take about 40 containers, which means 40 trucks off the road. So to my learned colleague who was speaking previously, yes, geographically, comparatively, Newcastle municipality is midway between Johannesburg and Durban. So we are busy with that project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Ms. or Mr. Madonsela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to the leadership of the Growth Coalition and the provincial, PPC leadership, secretariat, and the entire community of this meeting. Chairperson, we acknowledge the plan and the strategy which the PPC has put forward for our perusal and approval. While I was looking at the strategy, Chairperson, I just asked myself after I listened to a number of deliberation from my colleagues in the meeting, and my question comes up, and I just asked myself that yes, we have been drafting the plans and the strategies, and we have actually showed our wishes where we would like to see the KZN in terms of economic growth. But I think we just need to also look at how are we planning to implement the strategy so that it can talk to the men on the street. I'm just listening to another gentleman. I can't remember the name, where he said they've been implementing a lot of projects worth billions of rands, but along the way, so those projects, some of them have to be put on hold because of the interruption of the community. So as long as we have the strategy that does not talk to the men on the street, we will have the strategy after strategy. So my question to the gentleman that has delivered the presentation, what plan do we have so that we could be able to take the plan down into the men on the street and being adopted by the general public of KZN? So that is my question, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you for that. Are there any other hands in terms of suggestions and inputs? I see, Mr. Thompson, your hand is up. I see Ashley Cotterill, your hand is up. Can we take them in that order?
Okay, sure. So just sorry, my final comment, and I have emailed this to the PGDS review website or email address. It was just really just to be cognitive of the fact that the resources amongst the Growth Coalition, as well as let's call it the catalytic project team in my sphere, are limited. These bodies perform day-to-day tasks, as well as trying to accelerate catalytic projects, larger projects on various industries. And my comment for the document was simply let's at least, as a city leadership, we can't do all 100 projects. We're just not going to have enough resources. So let's quantify the projects in terms of demand, the track record of the deliverer, whether it be a Mondi or a SAPI or a Devemco, whatever field you're in. Have they got the ability to deliver? Have they got the cash to deliver? And then look at demand and supply. Is there a demand for housing in this area? Is there demand for more, I don't know, sugarcane silos or whatever it may be? And actually analyze it, and then put those into a bracket where we focus highly on the top 10 or 15 projects and make sure those 10 or 15 go. There's no point getting 100 projects to 85%. We have to get projects over the line. And I think that's something in terms of delivery, which the gentleman before me was alluding to. How do we make sure we deliver? I think rather deliver 10% than try and deliver 100% and end up delivering none. And that's my little input into the document and presentation that's been put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Ashley Cotterill, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and morning to all. I really just like to reiterate what's been said, and especially from the Coxstad delegation. It is extremely frustrating when you are giving of your very busy schedule to try and improve the circumstances of your local community, and you're not given the common decency of good, open, honest communication and interactions. Is the time needs to stop of talk tanks and commissions, and it's time is for action, and that action needs to be driven from the top politically. I think you can see by the attendance of this meeting, business is seriously committed to working with local government to make a difference in people's lives. And it's really time for the political people to stand up and be counted for and give back to the people that voted for them. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Colleagues, I'm just screening, ladies and gentlemen, any other hands before I hand over to, or summarize and hand over to the chairperson. Right, so if no other hands, team can just confirm. I've got a going, gone rule. So after going, gone, it's gone and we move. Going, right. Look, this doesn't close the process.
There is a hand, Marty. Actually, somebody on the hand up, Marty.
I think that we've just taken that one. Mr. Cottrell, can I lower the hand? Thank you very much. Thanks for that, team. Right, if I hear correctly, Andre started, and there was a lot of discussion, Chairperson, around the issue of theft and particularly local government fraud and corruption, and how we need to address that in terms of the impact it has on development. So there are a lot of issues around that, and I think what we're going to have to then also ask ourselves is how can we improve our systems and processes, and ideas maybe that we can get through the website on providing that support at a local government level so that we can strengthen our systems to do exactly that. I think is something we need to look at. Andre has also touched on the issue of M&E and how we need to look at those particular issues and looking at the interventions and monitoring. I think the other side that we need to look at from there is when we are going through the document and we're getting inputs from yourselves, are there other means that we can use to monitor more effectively, other sources of information or other systems that can perhaps improve our ability to be smarter with what we are monitoring? Because we also found a situation through our M&E expert who could not join us today, unfortunately, to say we've got so many indicators. Are we actually really measuring what matters? Or have we also got a wish list in terms of what we are trying to track in terms of development? So those sort of inputs would be quite important. The issues around opportunities for us to really outperform other provinces. Let us be bold and bring us some suggestions as to how we can maximize that. If it is just because we've got to implement that is there, that's great, but then we have to just step back, as Ricky was saying. So what is it that is stopping us? What do we need to do differently? Is it just about implementation, or are there other things that we need to refine? A lot of questions, and I think the suggestion around social cohesion, we take note of that, and we also support in the document, we are looking at more equitable development and spatial orientation, and maybe just a reminder on the presentation that we will be looking at our spatial development framework and how we look and work towards the district development model. A lot of questions about rail and road to rail. Yes, those projects are included, and we agree, and we look forward to those practical inputs and project suggestions that come through. Also, certainly the 2 ports are included as catalytic projects in the document, or linked to the catalytic projects for the province. So those are definitely part and parcel of the plan. Issues around the DDAs, we agree. We do need to strengthen the district development agencies, and they've been playing a critical role in what you would have heard of the one plan per district, or the district development model, in shaping those with the district and in partnership with the family, and we can, or family of municipalities. accountability at municipal level and the issues of consequence management. I think that is definitely something we need to strengthen from what we've seen in the document. Thank you very much for also the request and information on the dry ports and logistic hubs. Those are part of the plan through the SIPS projects and the corridor plans, and we note a lot of development that is happening as the projects are unfolding. Issues around community interruption. Yes, it's a challenge. There is a team within the Office of the Premier and ETIA that tries to assist, but we would also look forward to further suggestions. What can we do differently, and how can we do that? The prioritization of projects, absolutely, and I think this is one of the issues we also found through COVID. And the National Medium-Term Strategic Framework that is nearing completion of its review is saying we cannot have a wish list of projects. We do need to look at that project prioritization model, and we will be looking forward to inputs there as well. And the issue of opening and improving the means of communication from a local level through to a provincial and national level, but then also participation through our district development model chairperson is something that I hear we need to improve the link with the Growth Coalition through that model, but also to find strengthening the engagement and how we can engage more effectively with the structures of the Growth Coalition and the government and civil society interface. Andres, I do see your hand.
Yes.
If I can maybe take that comment
Yes.
and then hand over to the chairperson, if that's acceptable.
May I?
Please.
Okay, thank you. I just want to comment about 3 or 4 inputs from private sector. Let me start with Kokstad. The 2 gentlemen are very well known to me because we've been going there for the last 5 years. And for the last 2 years, we've been trying to broker a peace and cooperation between the public and private sector. We've even brought the acting director, the head of the Department of Economic Development and Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Mr. Sishlem Kiza, and yours truly. And we've engaged the mayor, we've engaged the municipal manager. We've had certain agreements. Unfortunately, the municipality, the mayor in particular, the MM, have not kept their promises, even in writing, when they've made those promises. So we brought this to the attention of the MEC, the new MEC, and the Premier, and hopefully there will be some movement in this regard, because it's totally unacceptable when the municipality makes their own decisions, increases by 50% on average rates, in some cases of the 400% when it comes to the farmers and so on, and that is not checked and not corrected. That is just not acceptable. And this, as the municipalities are now running out of money, I mean, you don't have to go far. Look at our capital, Pietermaritzburg, Msunduzi. I mean, they coverage of cash on hand is less than a day. In other words, whatever they get, they first priority is to pay their salaries and the increases on their salaries, not on infrastructure maintenance, on development. It is scandalous what's happening there in Pietermaritzburg. And then, unfortunately, more and more municipalities are starting to go that route. They're not paying for their services. The only thing they're paying is the salaries. When the salaries stop coming, you will see, then there will be a different reaction. But hopefully by that time, our political colleagues are going to fix it. So Du, who was also speaking from the Greytown, it's coming their way also, because the rates are starting to go up above what the agreement is between the public and private sector in terms of maintaining increases, related to inflation, but not ridiculous, 50% or 400% in some cases. That is absolutely, cynical and mind-boggling in terms of what it does to the economy, as such. In terms of the routes and hubs, You've seen the suggested decision by Transnet to move the head office to the Eastern Province. We have engaged through Growth Coalition the CEO. She has agreed to come. We will be taking that matter further. Hopefully, we'll come up with some sort of negotiated solution on the way forward. But there is a major progress in terms of the Cato Ridge dry port to complement the two harbors, Richards Bay and Durban. The President has mentioned in his State of the Nation address the other day that Durban should become the hub for Southern Africa and rebuild it to the glory that it should be. In terms of Newcastle, we are aware because we are there quite often, and they're doing good work in terms of also looking at they hubbing there and creating a logistical platform as such. So between the Cato Ridge and Newcastle, we're also lobbying Transnet to reintroduce servicing the Isakaweni precinct, commercial industrial precinct, because DeFi has moved the production from all over the place into that place. So obviously there would be major partners as far as using the services, the Transnet services. And, that would give further impetus to conversion from road to rail, which has been talked about for the last 15 years, but not much has happened. Because obviously, again, we can talk about what happened to PRASA and road and rail in terms of management or mismanagement. That's another story. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Andres. Mr. Msiwa, if I could hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Mati. And again, thank you very much to the leadership and the membership of the KZN Growth Coalition. As I indicated when we started with the presentation, our role here is to absorb, listen, and actually factor the input into the strategy where appropriate. We are very grateful that that process of indicating areas of concern, those areas have actually surfaced during this discussion. And just from our side, from the Planning Commission, we're really grateful for this meaningful partnership that we have with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Msiwa. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I have got a co-facilitator, Ms. Mzoneli. I think we have achieved from our side what we came to do today, but this is really the start of the process. We really would invite further comments, contributions and suggestions through the website. Initially, we were hoping to conclude our process by the end of January in terms of consultation, but without looking for excuses, COVID had really knocked us in terms of our process for consultation, which is why we were a little bit delayed. So our input date is by the 28th of February. So please do make use of that opportunity. Ms. Mzoneli, I hand back to you. Thank you very much.
Good day once more time. Let me thank once again Ms. Marti, thank the chairperson of the Provincial Planning Commission. Moreover, let me thank the KZN Growth Coalition through the coordinator and the entire membership and the leadership for this valuable inputs for this session. We are highly appreciative and thank you so much. We have come to the end of the engagement. I thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Go well.